Okay, so we just think, we're going to listen, think, analyse, check up on these things, these ideas of the Buddha, to see if there's some tools we can take from it to help us develop our amazing potential, to help us help others. Bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Sangye charan soke chongnam la jancho badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog sangye charan soke chongnam la jancho badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog sangye charan soke chongnam la jancho badu dagni kyapsu chi Dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sange drupa shok. So, one way of there's different ways of presenting Buddha's teachings, different ways of presenting Buddha's, well, his philosophy. It's a worldview, actually. Often it's surprising to hear that. We just think it's sort of a method for how to meditate, to become more calm. That's probably one of the simplest, or one of the most simplistic ideas that we have in the world about Buddhism. You have this idea of a person kind of being mindful, using meditation to help them become more calm. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's like, just one tiny, in a massive piece of puzzle with a million pieces, that's one corner of the puzzle. One corner, one piece, one tiny piece of it. But actually Buddhism's a worldview, it's a way of seeing the world and describing. So one way of talking then in those terms, what Buddha's saying is, the extent to which we are caught up in our mind, and we talked about this yesterday, the extent to which we're caught up in our mind, in these unhappy emotions, which have this characteristic of being delusional. This is a very accurate word in Buddhist psychology. Is the extent to which we suffer. So what he's saying is, and the job is to fix the mind. The job is to fix our views. So this sounds it can be a bit fundamentalist, like he's forcing us to believe in his view, which is how we think about religion, which makes us very nervous, But he's not asking us to believe anything. He's simply stating, he's basically saying, listen, this is what I've come up with from my experience about the way the world exists, about the way the world is, about what happiness is, what suffering is, what a person is, the causes, all the nuts and bolts of Buddhism. This is my observation from my own experience of how things are. And what he says, the consequence of that is, okay, if we think about learning a philosophy, you go to university, you study for several years, and you fill your head with very fascinating viewpoints. There's nothing wrong with that. But the crucial difference here is this. We think of it like that. You fill your head with really fascinating views about how things are, but you still go home and you're depressed and miserable and want to kill your husband. So in other words, we don't see much relationship between viewpoints, which we call up here, and down here. So in other words, you can be a genius mathematician, a genius scientist. You can even be a genius doctor, but still be miserable. So we don't see a relationship between what we think and our life. This is the crucial point that Buddha's making. And it's quite a profound point. He says the extent to which we point here, and we say suffering. Well, he says the extent to which we're suffering is the extent to which is what's going on up here. It comes down to the mind. So then a person who's trying to be a Buddhist, attempting to be a Buddhist, is basically like me in my case. I jumped in the deep end and I decided to take on Buddha's views as my working hypothesis. The whole deal, the whole caboodle, the entire puzzle, all the bits and pieces. That's my decision. So that means I'm learning to buy into Buddha's views about reality. And why am I doing that? Because I'm buying into Buddha's view that this is reality. I'm taking it as my hypothesis that his views are a depiction of reality. His views are a depiction of reality. He's not asking us to believe him. He's not forcing us. He's simply stating, this is what I found to be so. And the consequence of buying into these and then learning to gradually verify and experience that for yourself is your own liberation from suffering and your ability to help others. So for the Buddha, the reason to fill your head with a bunch of ideas about how things are is so that you can become less neurotic, less miserable, more happy, more wise, and more helpful. That's the point. That's the point. So what he's saying, obviously, is that what he has found to be so is reality. And he's allowed to say that. He's perfectly allowed to say that, but he's not forcing us to believe it. That's how we tend to think of religion, that you're supposed to believe it. You know, it's called dogma, and you must believe it. And that's reasonable. That is reasonable if we have posit a set of views that's coming from a superior being who is a creator. By definition, you can't prove what a creator says is true, because a creator is a superior being above you. So you need to learn to believe it. And I'm not criticizing that view. It's just not Buddha's view, that's all. Einstein will come along and tell us his views about how things exist, and he'll talk about relativity or E equals mc squared or something. We know he didn't have a dream about it. We know he didn't have a vision. We know it's not revelation. We hope he's not making it up. We assume it's coming from his own direct observation, his own direct experience, and we know he's not asking us to believe him. That's how we think about science. Well, that is the view in Buddhism, which sometimes is a surprise to us because we think of it as religion, and it is, but it's not the creator religion concept of belief. It's not that. You take it as your hypothesis. You can't prove E equals mc squared overnight. If you can't even add up 1 + 1 is 2, how can you possibly say to Einstein, come on, what are you talking about? What do you mean relativity? He wouldn't be so rude. You know that he's providing his findings, and he's saying it's over to you now to decide. It's over to you to work through these findings yourself and tick the boxes as you go along, and he's telling us that if you keep following his methodology, you will come to the same conclusions. Well, that's what Buddha's saying. That's his deal. That's his trip. That's what he's saying. So it's up to us. It's up to us to listen to it, think about it, if we choose to, and then gradually, as you go along, step by step, you verify it for yourself and you experience the truth of it for yourself. That's the point. You experience the truth of it for yourself, or not. As the Dalai Lama says, if you move along ticking the boxes and you get to a certain point where you discover that Buddha is wrong in his findings, then of course you must reject him. Of course you must. It's logical, because we're trying to find reality here. So that's the Buddhist approach. So then what are the things he says? How does he say things exist which contradict how we think about how things exist? Well, one of the first ones, these different philosophical views about the universe, you know. One of the first ones is that your mind isn't your brain. That's the materialist philosophical view, isn't it? It's not that, the Christians would agree too, but the Christians would add another thing and say there's a soul there. Well, Buddha disagrees with that view as well. He says no such thing as a soul. He will say our mind is not the brain. It's not even a function of the brain. Our mind is not physical. That's one view he has. And that's massive in itself. That is so huge, you know. He would say we're not created by somebody. That's even more shocking. If you're a Christian, God made you, and if you're a materialist, Mummy made you. It's the same principle. Somebody else created you. Somebody else gave you your mind and your qualities and blah, 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 you know. Not for the Buddha. He disagrees with that point. He has the view about karma. He has the view of karma, the law of cause and effect, that your consciousness goes back and back and back and is running within the law of cause and effect, that's such that everything you think and do and say programs your mind and brings you your future experiences. That's a really very different view, hugely different view. So these are Buddha's views, his own experiential findings. You don't have to believe it. Just shove it down whole. No, that's silly. You open your mind to the possibility and then you gradually try to prove it to be true, first intellectually and then experientially. That's how you be a Buddhist. That's the way to be a Buddhist. You don't have to do that. You can be a 1% Buddhist. You can watch your breath. Nothing wrong with that. But there's more to it if you want. So one of the first things the Buddha says we're living in la-la land in relation to is the simple, fairly evident reality that things change. He calls it impermanence. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is the universe as we know it. It is a constant state of change, isn't it? The seasons, the people, you get born, you get fatter, you get older, you die. Things, everything in the universe is like this. Everything in the universe is like this. This is the way reality is. It's evident to anybody with half a brain. But what Buddha's saying is, we live in denial of it. This is one of our big problems. So the key point that Buddha's making is, we suffer because what's in our mind is not in sync with how things are. That's the one way of describing Buddhism from A to Z. We suffer the extent to which our minds are not in sync with reality. And happiness, one of the consequences of becoming a Buddha, which is finally the happiness of the mind that's completely free of all delusions and full of all goodness, is that we're in sync with reality. Our mind is in sync with reality. So it's a really curious way to put it, because you don't go to university and study mathematics in order to get happy. You do other things to get happy, And that's where this massive disconnect, I'd say, between what we call thoughts and philosophical theories and concepts, and then we point here for happiness and suffering. We see no relationship between these. So it's kind of that interesting point. This is Buddha's essential point. So of course you're the boss here, and you have to get to prove he's true, but you've got to start with your hypothesis. You've got to start taking it on board as an idea. That's the idea. So what about impermanence then? It's not something complicated, but it's already quite shocking that we can't bear it. We can't bear impermanence. We can't stand change. It's terrifying to us. So we've got to look at the logic why. What's underpinning that? Well, it seems to me what's underpinning our fear of change, and therefore our fantasy that we impose on things of being permanent, is attachment. Like we talked yesterday, the Buddha's fundamental presentation of the contents of our mental consciousness in day-to-day life. And we get down to these three main neurotic states of mind. There's thousands of them, but these are they call them the three poisons. Sounds kind of cute, And there's a hierarchy of them. There's this root neurosis, this primordially deep, so hard to identify. We discussed it yesterday, and the whole framework is this teachings about emptiness, which is always so puzzling and confusing to us. This is the deepest misconception in the mind. That's the root of all the others, he says. But on the basis of this, as we've been talking, is the one of day-to-day life, which is again a shock to us, this one called attachment. This misconception, this fantasy that we have made up, that's multifaceted. And this is primordially deep inside us. So the way Lama Zopa talks about the time of death, he says the reason we're so afraid at time of death is because of attachment. So and that's why I'm saying yesterday, if we don't understand attachment, Buddha's particular view about attachment, we will not understand Buddhism at all. You've got to get what he means by this, So the word is unfortunate because it's a word that we use to refer to something good. So we get very confused when we hear about it. So because we have this primordial hunger, this emotional hunger for something that we feel we haven't got, there's this terrible disconnect between what we feel and what we think we need to get. Always something more, always something more. We always feel like the real energy of attachment is a sense of lacking something. In other words, it's a hunger. So it's obvious if you're hungry, it's because you're lacking something, isn't it? So it's this emotional hunger. Always assumption that I'm lacking something, that I'm not something, that I'm not enough, don't have enough, don't do enough, don't get enough, am not enough. It's its natural state. It's primordially deep inside us. So one of the functions of attachment, like I said, it's multifaceted. And it's a viewpoint. This is the point. When we think of these things, we think of emotions because we're so used to the way it impacts upon our body. And that's only when we notice them in our life. We only notice these things when they affect our body. When your body is, when you feel, you talk about a physical feeling of anger, of jealousy, of whatever it is. Because these states of mind that are so primordially deep, way deep down, when they finally get stronger and more powerful, they come to the surface and impact upon our physical. That's when we notice them. Of course, it's way too late. So attachment is this emotional hunger that then brings the next facet of it, which is to always hanker after something, and then to manipulate, to search to get it, and then to manipulate to get it, and then to expect the results from it that attachment has made up, and then to exaggerate, grotesquely exaggerate its capacity to give me happiness, its actual qualities. Attachment, all the delusions in Buddha's view, one way of describing the function of all the neuroses, all these misconceptions, is that they embellish reality. As Lama Zopa says, they decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that just aren't there. And that's the killer, We don't see that. Because we're so addicted to these misconceptions that we think that what I'm seeing is the way it is. We can't see that my mind has projected certain fantasies onto something. We can't see the difference, and that's the killer. And that's the job that we have to do, to learn to distinguish this. So because of this massive attachment, you get into a relationship. Where's my Jonathan? Jonathan's still back. He's back again. So Jonathan, get into a relationship with Jonathan. And Nick, I don't know, God knows where Nick is. He's gone. So to have a relationship with Jonathan, that means, all this story this massive story has built up, and all these projections, all these neediness, all these fantasies, all these stories. I've kind of painted this picture in my mind of Jonathan and what Jonathan should do for me, and I plonk that on top of Jonathan. And I can't see that my view of Jonathan is not the same as the Jonathan that's sitting over there. That's the massive disconnect. So because of this massive attachment, we feel when you've got it, oh, finally I have found happiness, we say. So hear those words. Finally I found happiness. The assumption is you've got it and then you've sealed it. Now I've got it. Now I've got it. And you think of it as something that is there every day, solid and permanent. This is how we do every single thing. This is what we're doing constantly. So the lie that we're describing here is the misconception of seeing it as permanent. We don't realize we do it. Even though we know intellectually Jonathan will get older and get more wrinkled and fat and will die or leave me. We know that it will happen to me. We know everything is like that. We know it deeply, but attachment can't stand to think about it. So at the time of death, this is when it's most powerful. So attachment has the function of hankering. It has the function of exaggerating something's deliciousness. It has the function of then manipulating to get it and then possessing it. All of these things. But it also has the function of, its bare bones function is over-conceptuality. Constant writing novels in the head. That's what we call fantasies. Fantasizing about something. Thinking about it, embellishing it, writing a movie in the head, imagining it, going through it in your head. That's the function of attachment. Another function of attachment, and this is day-to-day life, is always looking forward to something. This is massive. That's what keeps us buoyant. When you look into the past, you remember lovely things, and you think of lovely things now, and you look into the future, and you anticipate going for that meal, you anticipate the next date, you anticipate the job next week, you anticipate all these delicious things, and you look into the future, and all the time attachment's writing this story about all these things, looking forward to something. We spend our whole life like this. You get up in the morning, and you have your list of jobs. So you look forward to this, and then you have lunch, and you look forward to that, and then afternoon tea, then you look forward to dinner, then you look forward to going out, and all these plans. So attachment's job is to get all buoyant and excited about them. So it's one function is, so then at the time of death, finally, if you're a materialist, if you have a materialist philosophical view, that's your view about the world, then obviously you have no interest in death. You never think about death during your life. It's this thing that we literally ignore, and it's fairly evident why. Because what is there after death? If you're a materialist, there is only a black hole. Now, who wants to look forward to a black hole? I'm sorry, nobody. So of course you live in denial. It's beyond, so that's why the terror at the time of death. Literally terror for most people. A friend of mine 30, 40 years ago when she worked in the hospice movement in California said it was a given among hospice workers that most people die with fear. That's how Lama Zopa talks in the book. And fear is a function of attachment, because you're holding on to this idea of you and yours, and it is beyond bearable. It is unbearable not to have you, and especially the body. The thing we identify most with is this body, and as far as the materialist view is concerned, that's all there is. So there is nothing finally to look forward to. So this is too terrifying for us. It is beyond terror. So they say at the time of death, as they describe the process technically from the Vajrayana model, This gradual, it's described in a process in terms of 8 stages of gradual deconstruction of the various components, the various bits and pieces of the person, physical and mental. Before we stop breathing, in the first of these 4 of the 8 stages, this is when this terror kicks in extra powerful. So this is described, actually, it's interesting, in this process that Buddha taught called the 12 links of dependent arising. It's his description of these stages that we go through. Every day we're creating thousands of these cycles of rebirth. First there's this, then this, which gives rise to that, which gives rise to this, and then rebirth, and then that, and because of this, and then because of that, and then because of this. This endless, continuous cycle. You can almost say if we stop creating more karma now, but never cleaned up what we've already created, it would never end. We've got so many cycles of rebirths planted in our mind, and it's this process that occurs day by second every day, you know. So Lama Zopa in his death book describes in particular the function of these 12 links at the time of death. So the reason to talk about all of this is because death's going to happen. Death happens all the time. So this is where, for example, Atisha, in his text that is the basis of Tsongkhapa's explanation, this Lam Rim that we talk about, this junior school, high school, university, postgraduate structure of all the Buddha's teachings, the junior school entry level, in the junior school level, which is the essence of abiding by the laws of karma, practicing morality, refraining from harming, the first thing that Atisha and then Tsongkhapa gets us to think about, to energize us, to want to even practice, is to think about impermanence. But not just ordinary, not just impermanence. Hello? Grab a chair. Is there a chair there for you? Good. Okay, but move it. I can't see you there, so move it. If you want to see me, move it beside this side of the pillar, that I can see you. If you want to see me. You can hide if you like. Bring your chair over here. You want a cushion better? Oh, okay. Good. All right, darling. Be comfortable. I think cushions are terrible, frankly. I mean, we're not, some of you might be Asian, but I'm not, and I'm not used to sitting cross-legged, and I never got used to it. Don't you worry. Oh, what? You what? Oh, wow, how wonderful. Well, I'm glad you went to it first. That's good. So, okay. So the way Tsongkhapa talks about impermanence, the Buddhist teachings, actually, they talk about impermanence at the gross level, which is the one that's evident to anybody with half a brain, like I said. You look out there, and you can see in the winter that that's not the same tree as it was in the summer. So it's pretty evident. We can see if you look in the mirror, as much as we don't like it, it's not the same as who was there 5 years ago. Isn't it? We know that. You get shocked, you know. We know that. So, but it's fascinating that we can't. The key point to notice is we don't like it, isn't it? We don't like change. Or if it's good change, we like it. But the idea of change in general, you know, is something we would rather, because of attachment, hold on to something. We've got it. Now I've got it. This precious thing, you know. Happiness, Jonathan, a job, your body's the right shape that you want it to be. Suddenly we impose this, it's now set in stone. We're trying to lock it in there. And there's something primordially instinctive. So there's a subtle level of impermanence that really is very profound. And we can even confuse it for the teachings on emptiness, which is called subtle impermanence. The very fact of something's coming into being implies it's going out of being. It is very extensive in the teachings. But Tsongkhapa gets us to talk about the gross impermanence, and not just impermanence of cups and toilets and relationships, but impermanence of me. It's called death. So his agenda is to get us to understand impermanence, which is the reality of the universe. But it's a particular wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. So why do we need a wake-up call? Well, it's pretty evident. The Buddha's reason here, the teacher's, Tsongkhapa's reason at this point to get the wake-up call of the reality of my own death is because then I'll get the energy to not waste this precious life. That's the logic of it, not waste it. We get that. We get it completely. Like when you go on a vacation, even as a weekend, You look forward to it, you go away, this delicious hotel, you know it's only 2 days. From the second you even move in with the key, already the tick's clocking. The clock's tick's clocking. The clock's ticking. We understand that, don't we? So this is the interesting point. Because we know that vacation is only 2 days, it's impermanent, but there's a sense of urgency not to waste it, isn't there? You don't go, well, what's the point of going away for 2 days? It's going to end anyway, why bother? You wouldn't say that. You know it's because it's only 2 days, you're going to make the most of it. That's exactly the point about life. Whereas when it comes to relationships with Jonathan, if I tend to think that he could leave me in 2 days, I think, well, why bother? Why bother, you know? It's got to be forever. So it's very curious. We get it when it comes to certain things that we realize is impermanence, and the idea of its being impermanent energizes you to not waste it. Well, that's the key point that Buddha says here, which Atish is getting us to think about. And it's huge, because then it gives us optimism. Because how tragic to waste. So to waste something, then we have to go to the next step, which is about the idea of karma, that every millisecond we're sowing seeds. So then, of course, you want to, given that negative seeds will ripen as suffering and positive seeds will ripen as happiness, which is the logic that Buddha talks, then obviously I want happiness and don't want suffering. So it's a logical deduction. I better not, you know, I better not waste my life. So there's a whole bunch of logic in it, but you've got to think about it. So even getting in touch with impermanence is so powerful. And the reason is because Buddha's not trying to stuff it down our throats. This is the crucial point I want to make again. Buddha is not saying he's made up impermanence and he's got copyright on it and he wants us to believe it. Not like that. No. Einstein doesn't own copyright to relativity. He simply has observed it. It's reality. It's natural. It's reality. It's how things are. With his own brain, with his own intelligence, he's observed it and articulated it. That's what we mean by natural law, and that's Buddha's view. All of this stuff is natural law. It's not Buddha's law. There's no equivalent to call Buddha's law. He didn't make it up. He's not the owner. So what he's saying is, this is the whole point again, remember, the extent to which we're not in touch with the reality of impermanence is the extent to which we suffer. The extent to which we're not in touch with the reality that our mind is a continuity of mental moments that isn't physical, that didn't come from mummy, daddy, God, blah, 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 is the extent to which, you know, the extent to which we're not understanding that is the extent to which we suffer because it's reality. So his point is, what he has observed is reality. It is real, it's how it is. But he's not asking us to believe him. He's allowed to say it's reality. Einstein is allowed to say relativity is reality. But we know he's not forcing us to believe it. That's the massive point. But as soon as we hear it as religion, we think it's being shoved down our throats. Oh, you mean I'm supposed to believe in reincarnation? We'll say, horrified. No, not believe in a damn thing. Check it out, baby. You're a grown-up. Open your mind to the possibility, and then it's up to you to prove it or not. Don't just swallow it whole. That's just intellectual laziness. So the key point I'm kind of keep making it, the Buddha's whole point from here to Buddhahood is the extent to which we are not in sync with reality, at whatever level, is the extent to which we suffer. That's it. It's such a profound, simple point. It's kind of astonishing. So clearly then the job of being a Buddhist is to bring your mind into sync with reality. So here, the starting point is you can make up your own. You can come up with, not make up, you can come up with your own view of reality. No one says you have to buy into Buddha's view. But Buddha's, you know, no one says that you have to buy into Einstein's view. You can say, okay, I'm going to reinvent the wheel. Bugger Einstein, as we say in Australia. Excuse me, that popped out there. You don't say that in Boston, do you? No, it's very English, isn't it? It's a very relaxed kind of swear word in Australia. It's not so bad, you know. What? It is. It's more. So you say it in normal language, you know. Americans don't say it at all, do you? Bugger. It's very funny. Anyway, never mind. I won't say it anymore. It just popped out. So it's up to, you know, we can reinvent the wheel. We don't have to listen to Buddha or Einstein or anybody else. We can start fresh ourselves. But if someone's done all the work, it's a bit of a silly old waste of time to reinvent the wheel, isn't it? Why not take on board their views as your hypothesis, and then you can go along, and if you do each step of the way. That's what Buddha himself did. He was born in this astonishing, unbelievably sophisticated, genius set of thinkers. These Indian geniuses. Like I said, we don't know anything about the Indians. We all love all the Greeks, you know. All our fancy words are in Greek. But these Indians, what do we know about them? We don't. It's not our culture at all. We just think of these vague, strange people who lived back then, you know, with red dots on their faces or something. But really it's an astonishingly sophisticated views of reality, way back before the Buddha. As the Dalai Lama said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. That's a shock to us. We thought it was Freud, 150 years ago. I mean, it was so rude, They're the ones who created this extraordinary system called single-pointed concentration, this genius, sophisticated psychological skill that enables you to unpack and unravel the contents of your own mind and go to this more subtle level of cognition. It's astonishing what they've accomplished. They mapped the mind internally. The Buddha's view of the mind is still coming from the view of these Indians. They did all the work. So Buddha didn't reinvent the wheel like snotty-nosed, or, I'm going to make my own trip. He went through their system and then he diverged in his own direction in relation in particular to his own experiential findings about the nature of self. So he didn't shuck out what they did. He used it, agreed with it, and then continued to go on and then came up with his own views after that. So nothing wrong with taking a person's views about reality and then going on from there. It's intelligent. So how does a teacher get us to think about impermanence then at this very first level, entry-level junior school, before we even begin to want to abide by the laws of karma, to want to practice morality? Well, there's 3 points, 3 bullet points. The first one he gets us to think about is that death is definite. And the second one he gets us to think about is the time of death is absolutely not definite. That should scare the life out of us. The third point is the conclusion, is the action point. But these first two lead us to the action point. So the first one is to think about, to contemplate, to meditate on, to analyze, to observe. Guess what, folks? Every sentient being dies. It's a dramatic way of saying every flower wilts and dies, but it's the person that counts, because we are one of those people, and it's the one we live in most denial of, because we can't stand the thought of not being this present me. It's so primordial, this fear, it's very fascinating. Can't stand the thought of not being me. So thinking about observing the truth out there, that beings die. So that's something you can observe. You don't have to sit there and think about that in your head. You can see it every single second, all the time. But we see it every second. We see that ants and dogs and people and beings and babies and old people die. We can see it. It's definite. We can see it, but we don't join the dots. We don't see it for what it is. We don't get a learning from it. We don't get a wake-up call from it. And that's the point here. So the conclusion to come to when you see that ants die, mothers die, babies die, people die. Now this is really more the second point. The death, any sentient being who comes into existence definitely will die. That's the one logic, the one piece of logic. So then it doesn't become a wake-up call though until you then say, wow, that's going to happen to me. Then it becomes a wake-up call. Even when we see our beloveds die, it gets really close to home when our beloveds die, our pussycat dies, our poodle dies, our friends die, our neighbours die. Our countrymen die, people close to us die. We still don't get the point. It's more shocking then because it's closer to home, and the main thing we get from it is grief and loss, but we still don't get the real wake-up call, which is, that will happen to me. That's the wake-up call. So then if you conclude that death is definite, I will die, then already the wake-up call is profound. But we've got to scare ourselves more yet and go to the second point, which is the time of death. No idea. We can get a ballpark idea, If you're 5, you could argue, if you did your research, that you could live till you're 90. It's not an impossibility. Somebody's out there. She wants to come in. Can somebody help her, please? Or she's just circumambulating. Oh, I see. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Okay. So this seems almost ridiculous points to think about. Yeah, well, I know all that. I know people's going to die. Give me something more intelligent, please, Buddha. No, he says we've got to get this one. And his agenda is, get a wake-up call is the point. To get a wake-up call. To not want to waste this precious life. There's something so simple, it's embarrassing, but how long have we been hearing it? But it just doesn't go in. We're as thick as posts because we can't bear to think about it. Because the grasping at permanent me, as Lama puts it, is so stupendous, is so primordial, is so frantic. In other words, it's like, you know, everybody else in the world can see that Jonathan doesn't love me anymore. Everybody else can see that he's even cheating on me. But because of my own incredible attachment, do you understand my point? It's so clear. Because of my own fantasy of divine Jonathan, wonderful Jonathan, best partnership, happy, all the story we build up, which attachment builds up, I'm blind to the reality. Everyone else can see it's coming to an end very quickly. But I'm as blind as a bat. That's what attachment does to us. It blinds me from seeing reality. So because of attachment to me and the status quo and my little bubble called life, it's just that you can't bear the thought. We don't want to even confront the thought. It's like unbearable. Don't go there. You can't even begin to bear the thought that I could die. So it sounds simple, but it's quite profound. So as Lama Zopa says, we are so foolish. We divide the world into living people and dying people. We know people do die, but it's never us who die. I'm always in the living people category, isn't it? I'm a living person. Then you've got this group called dying people. And it's like it's a special race, you know? You have to have a passport to get there. And it's very fascinating, isn't it? You listen. What is a dying person? A dying person is a person who really is on the way out. So they don't exist, you don't want to talk about them, you talk in hushed tones about them, they don't have a life, they don't have a future, they're not like a real person. They're like in limbo. They're not real, you know? It's very profound, this. Oh, she's dying. Not a real person at all. Ordinary people don't die. A living person is on this side of the fence who's got a life and a future. That's how we think. But Lama Zopa, don't be so ridiculous. Living people die before dying people every day. But we don't want to do that research. We don't want to do that research. It's too painful. It's hilarious. I remember one guy I read about in Newsweek years ago, about that article about death. And he had got MS or something, one of those slow burning deaths, you know. And he's the CEO of some big company. And he thought, well, I'm not going to tell anybody. Why should I? Wait till I get sicker. But he thought, I better tell my board. Well, they sacked him in a week. Who wants a dying person when you're running a company? How revolting. No, but hear it. It's true. That's how we think, isn't it? A dying person is this massive label. It's hilarious. It's like embarrassing that we should buy into it. But we do. A dying person. I mean, my friend on death row, if you think of anybody who's really a dying person, it's people on death row. They've got the label, their house is called death row. They're definitely dying people. We think. Oh, the poor guys, they're dying. God, how do they cope? She says, don't be so ridiculous. It's not a cliche. It's a truth, but we hear it as a cliche. We're all dying. It's just a question of time. That's all. But we don't think it because we project, living person, we project a future onto that person. They've got a future. They've got a life, you know. They're living. It's hilarious. It's got no basis in reality whatsoever. It's just fantasy. So my friend Frank on death row in Kentucky, on death row, yeah, he's a dying person, but he still had a few years, you know. So you kind of count those years. He's still a living person. But then suddenly he's preparing for all his appeals and all that. Then suddenly leukemia gets him. He's dead in a month. Big surprise, you know. Equally, the other way, we're just as stupid. Friends of mine have divorced. They're Buddhist. And the husband got this virulent cancer. He's going to be dead in 2 months. So she went back to help him die. She went back to live with him to help him die. Because he's dying. She went back to live because he's dying. So she's going to help him doing his practice every day. Or 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. He was still alive. He became a living person again. So she had to leave him again. He didn't die on schedule. Are you communicating? We are kind of embarrassing. We're kind of silly, aren't we? Do you understand? So even dying person is permanent. What a drag, he became a living person again. Oh, it messed up the schedule, you know. We are so ridiculous. A friend of mine went to, I always thought these stories, a friend of mine went to Los Angeles to help his daddy die of cancer. Well, he got better. So they had a party celebrating, now daddy's a living person, and he died next day of heart attack. I mean, it's not a joke, and it is a joke. It isn't, because all I'm pointing out is our projections, our fantasies, the views that we make up, that we put onto reality, but we don't realize we do. This is the point. This is the most obvious one. We should be embarrassed by it, but we do it all the time. Or, you know, in general, the same as I always quote the Nicole Kidman story, you know. In Vanity Fair, I read this article when she was still with Tom Cruise. At the end, she said, "We will be together until we're 80. It's the same concept. This relationship is real, and this is the point. This is how you analyze it. It's very fascinating. Because you're alive now, because their relationship was alive, you understand? That means attachment was getting everything it wanted. I'm not being mean. It's the analysis. Everything was lovely. Tom is there. You go home. Tom's there. You talk. You've got a life. We've all got a life. We've got a bubble. Our life, isn't it? Our bubble. Hubby's there. Dad's there. The kids are there. The life is there. If it's going sort of relatively well, when it's going well, so it feels real, doesn't it? So even now, you've got a home. You guys came. You're not homeless, I presume. You came from a house, right? You right now think of your house. Every one of us will believe with 1,000,000,000% certainty that in several hours you go back, it'll be there. We believe it with certainty. There's not 1 millimetre of us that thinks it could have burned down. Do you understand? That's how we are. Which means you don't get depressed and think, well, my house could burn down, because that's what worry is. You'll never leave your house in case it burns down. That's neurotic. So all the time we're fighting against permanence, you know? We're fighting against impermanence. We're hoping things aren't impermanent. So we have expectation. This is the function of attachment, is massive expectation, massive belief that therefore, because we're happy now, this is the logic, because attachment was blissed out then, the kids, the house, Tom, everything was real and delicious. And I'm not criticizing. This is called happiness. How marvelous. But because it's delicious, attachment can't bear the thought of its ever stopping. So therefore we lie and say it will never stop. We will be together until we're 80. We project that extra piece onto it, but it's not logical. But we can't bear it. That's the point. We can't bear it. It's painful. It's heartbreaking. So we project and lie onto it. We will be together until we're 80. Now this is the point. When he did leave her, you know, for Penelope Cruz or whatever happened, I mean, I just joke, you know. What happened? The bubble burst. Her expectations exploded. So what happened? She fell down to despair. Naturally. And now look, now this will never end either. But that's why we kill ourselves. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's seeing the bad thing as lasting forever. So we do it to even when bad things. That's why we can't bear bad things. That's why when things go wrong, we get profoundly depressed, because we can't see that bad thing will change. So in both cases, the believing in permanence is the killer. You see what I'm saying? We live in a fantasy now, it's all perfect, and now we live in the despair that everything has gone. I have got nothing to look forward to, we say. That's despair and depression. That's why we kill ourselves. Both are a lie. So what's shocking is, you see, this is the shocking point. We believe that we're suffering because Tom left us. No. We suffer because we believed he wouldn't leave us. So back to Buddha's point, we suffer because of the misconceptions deep in our bones. This is what he means, that literally everything comes down to the mind. It's not some cosmic concept, it's technically true. If you're not in touch with reality, you suffer. So if you've got a $5 note, but you think it's 50, you will always suffer. If you expect $50 worth, and you always get disappointed. That's how we suffer. There's a disconnect between what we think and what is real. That's what Buddha's saying all the way to emptiness. We can see it, we can prove it, right there. Everybody knows Jonathan is not in love with me much anymore, but I can't bear the reality of it, so I've put a fantasy onto it. Everybody else can see it. You know, the person who's got cancer and they can't bear to face the truth that they're dying. Everyone else can see it. The doctors can see it. People can see it. That person can't see it. And that's not. So they're suffering not because they've got cancer. We suffer because we think we can't bear the thought of not existing. It's down to attachment every time. Can you hear me? This is primordially deep. So primordially deep that that's why we call it normal. And all Buddha says is, no, babies, you can change these conceptions. You can, by facing reality. We say the words, face reality. Come on, get in touch with reality. This is Buddha's exact point. His point exactly. And it's the hardest job we'll ever do, because we're addicted to these lies, you know. And it always sounds very brutal when you face reality, like reality is horrible in its nature. It's not. Seeing reality is liberation, Buddha says. Even if it's a horrible reality, it's still reality. And we don't have fantasy expectations. We're not seeing things as fantasy. We're not projecting lies onto things. We are now in touch with reality. It's got this cliched meaning, but it's profoundly, literally true. That's Buddha's whole point, from here to enlightenment. So when you realize that you could die, Lama Zopa says, it's best to think I'll die today. It's best. We just laugh, you know. Don't be ridiculous. First we think, don't be ridiculous. Of course I won't die today. There's one little story of this astrologer, a Tibetan astrologer. There must be somebody in the room with him at the time it happened. How would they know otherwise? It's a great story, you'll see. He did his own chart, his own astrological chart, and it said he'd die today. Right, in his own chart. And he was immediately thinking, he sat there, apparently, this is roughly the story's like this, his elbows resting on the windowsill where there's some wooden, something or other, like wooden, curtains, what do you call those things? Shutters, something like this. And he's thinking, and he's picking his ear with this long kind of thing they use to do their beard, I think a long piece of metal, checking out, thinking, where did I make a mistake in my astrology chart? And then the thing hit his elbow, and his thing went in and he died. I mean, but here's the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, he assumed it was wrong. Of course you're not going to die today. Ha, 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 we think. I mean, we should be embarrassed at our stupidity. It's like everyone else knows he's planning to leave me for Mary, and he's planned it all. I'm the only one who doesn't know. Not possible. Well, somebody said, well, Benny, you know he's going to leave you today. No, not possible. Because why? Because I'm living in a fantasy and not seeing reality. It's the same here. It's hilarious. I love that story. Because of attachment. So the conclusion, the action point is the third point. These are the little bits that get you to see the truth. The wake-up call is the point. A teacher's agenda is to give us a wake-up call, not to sort of, you know, you can do all this in relation to cups and toilets and thermoses, but it doesn't hit you quite as hard as if it's you who's going to disappear, you know. So it's very skillful, psychologically. So the action point, there's a series of givens, basically. Given Buddha's view that my consciousness is a beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments, given that every millisecond of what I think and do and say sows seeds in that consciousness, programs that consciousness, and seeds necessarily will ripen in the future as my future, given that every single negative seed will ripen as my suffering and every single positive seed will ripen as my happiness, and let's face it, there's either one or the other. There's a third category called neutral. We'll forget them. They're boring. Given finally, no-brainer, hey, guess what, Robina? I do want happiness and don't want suffering. Well, conclusion, right now, stop, first entry-level practice, stop sowing more negative seeds. Really evident, logical, and obvious. And then start taking care of the seeds I've already planted in the past before they ripen as suffering. That's junior school practice. Abide by the laws of karma. Be a good person. Do what your grandma says. Behave nicely. Don't kill, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong people. Don't rabbit on about nothing. It's not complicated. 7 little baby things. Impermanence is the energizer that gets us to want to do that, you know. So in other words, the only thing at the time of death, when the mind and the body separate, the only thing that's of use to me at that time, given these views, is my virtuous karmic seeds. That's it. The fruits of my past virtuous actions. Within this framework, this is the logic. So of course, to hear that logic, you've got to buy into that framework. You've got to very intense levels kind of pop up out of nowhere. It's a shock. One wouldn't anticipate them. Because the intensity of the attachment to me and the body and mind is super powerful then, because of course you're ceasing, you know. You're ceasing to exist. This package as we know it is ceasing to exist. So the attachment is primordially deep. And when the grasping kicks in, that's the key thing that becomes the trigger for the number 2 link, which is the karmic seed, which will be the one that determines your next rebirth. So if your mind's freaking out at that, this grasping occurs even in happy people. It's going to occur unless you're a highly realized person. It's going to occur whoever you are. But if you're freaking out and living in denial of death and absolutely frantic and not knowing what's going on, you've got no one to help you, and you're distraught, you're distressed, you feel full of fear, don't know what to think, which is normal, suffering people, how they die, drugged out of your brain. This grasping is stupendously powerful. And that will, because you're freaking out, it can only trigger a negative seed. Then that sends you to, that gives you a really suffering rebirth. This is technical. It's not blame. It's not punishment. There's no one doing it to you. Your own mind does it to yourself. If you're relatively peaceful, you've got to practice how you love God. So you love God. So then you can use this fear. This is what Lama Zopa says in the book. You can use this attachment to take it away from grasping at the status quo, take this attachment away from grasping at me here and think of it as looking forward to heaven. That's very skillful, because then the mind's relaxed. If you talk to your mummy and describe heaven, how beautiful it is, how God loves you, God is waiting for you, or even though your beloved is waiting for you, whatever, make that causes the attachment to stop focusing here, and it's like you give, one kid won't let go of this toy, so you give them this toy in this hand, so they'll drop that one. It's skillful means to shift the focus of your attachment from here, which brings fear, to there, to the future. It's just a concept. But your mind relaxes, and your mind is anticipating something delicious, so your mind can relax. It's skillful means. Okay, if you're a materialist, you don't tell them to think about God, they'll get upset. So other things you can do, one of the key things in Rinpoche's book, there's a whole series of types of practices to do in that period before the death, weeks and months, and especially at the time of death, as death is coming. One of the key ones is to talk about the person's good qualities, praise them, love them, tell them what a beautiful person they are, what a wonderful mother you've been, how kind you've been. Because look at our own minds. We never think of the good things we do. We're always worried about our negativity, always guilty, always fearful. And death is 1,000 times worse than normal because your mind's out of control. So it's to give a person some kindness and love, be a solid, calming, friendly, warm presence for them. It's like a miracle for that person. Like in old people's homes, I'm sure even just the cleaning lady is the one who can make the person happy. You know, just be kind, look at them with loving eyes. Immediately, because we're all human, it'll help us, you know. Somebody to hold on to when you're feeling stressed. And we all know, look at our lives. Since we're tiny kids, as soon as something goes wrong, think about it, we immediately think of someone to turn to, don't we? Don't we? But if you've got no one to turn to, that's the despair and the fear. So to have someone to turn to have someone you can refer to, who's there, who's coming in, and you're just so happy when they walk in the door because they make you feel better. We need that. Unless you're a highly evolved being, we all are like this. We need people to love us and support us. This is virtuous. This is good. Give them a good attachment. This is how it is. This is why, as Rinpoche says, if you want to help a person at the time of their life, this is when they need you most. To help them navigate this fear. To help them die peacefully and virtuously. So that when they do die, the seed that is triggered is a virtuous one, which programs them to take a decent future life. And then death will be very peaceful, very blissful. People die very blissfully, very radiantly. And that's proof that a virtuous seed was triggered, because they can almost see their future life coming. So it's very pleasing. Person who's got a negative seed, it is terrifying, because as you go through the death process, your mind gets more subtle. So it's like you can begin to see, when your mind's more subtle, it's clairvoyant. It's naturally how it is. So you're seeing the future. People have terrifying visions sometimes of their future next life. It's horrifying. Or blissful light. They say in the text, when you die with virtue, when the virtuous seed is triggered in this period before you stop breathing, death is blissful. It's like going towards the light. I say it like that. The mind is very pleased, very happy, very virtuous. So it's a technical thing. So do everything you can to make your loved ones, the mouse, the dog, your grandma, your husband, make them peaceful and virtuous. Because of grasping and because of attachment. Any questions about these people? Any questions? Yeah.
I just had something when I knew you were talking about death and I came in, that I had read an article once by somebody, and I had done a lot of reading about Kubler-Ross. You know,
Yes.
I read her books and I got ready. It was a long time ago. A lot of it's now being taught, and it's also part of Buddhism. But somebody once wrote that sometimes we think we're, well, we might be suffering when somebody dies. We're bereaving when we're grieving when somebody dies. But that person also said, unless it's your mother, your father, somebody you're close to, and you go to a funeral, and then you cry or you get emotionally, mostly they say it's because you're so afraid of death, you don't know really what it is. And so you're sort of grieving for yourself. Like, what is this all about? And then when you go to a funeral and it's not really somebody close to you, does that sound right? Because I know all this. I've been studying Buddhism. I've heard about this for 25 years. But when death comes, how am I going to be? I mean, am I really going to be able to believe all that I've learned, or am I going to react differently and be afraid?
So based on what you just said, what would you think the solution is then? To answer your own question.
Keep practicing and
keep
believing.
Seeing the truth of it.
Yeah.
Keep facing. You see, if someone tells me that Jonathan's preparing to leave, like Jonathan leaving death, same thing, let's say. I've been living in denial of it, haven't I? Are you following my thinking? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as death. So if I've lived in denial up to then, that it's a shock to my system to hear that he's going to leave me, because the first thing is it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible, because my fantasy has been running the show, my fantasy of permanence. So if I'm brave enough, that means you open yourself. So when you think about death, when I think about Jonathan leaving, then the way to answer your question so that you know that you will die happily is that when you hear about it, you stop there and don't just gloss over it. You say to yourself as you're at the funeral, you say, and these words are so powerful, you know, honey, this is going to happen to me. You don't just say it and make a joke. You then think through the consequences. And so the Buddha's consequences is that I will die, and at that time I want to be peaceful, I want to be virtuous. Why? Because I want the virtuous karmic seeds to be triggered. Why? Because that'll determine my next decent human rebirth so I can carry on practicing. So you've got to think it through. Not just say the words, oh, I'll die, and then change the subject. It's a technical process. And if you really you buy into Buddha's view about karma and rebirth, you've got to think it through. You see my point? You've got to confront it, face it, think it. Not just, oh, yes, I know I'll die, and then you change the subject. It's not enough. It's not enough. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Well, that's up to how much teachings you've had and what you know. Do you understand?
I've had a lot, but maybe it's in the meditation instead, maybe.
What do you mean?
I know the teaching so well. I actually got very into Buddhism when I read Sogyo Rinpoche's The Tibetan Book of Living. That really hit me. And I went to my next retreat, or my first retreat, because of that. I went to see him teaching. And then I kept looking for a group to be with, so that took a little while until I found something close to home, or here in Massachusetts.
So do you get teachings about the process or not? Because this is the Tibetans really go into this process, is it?
Yeah. Well, I went on YouTube and I saw one. I went to the Tibetan Book of Living the Dead, and they showed a village where somebody died. So they showed the family, the village in Tibet or Nepal, and they show the whole process, the family.
But this is not what I'm talking about, the internal process.
Yeah. Well,
actually, technically what happens and how you need to be prepared to help yourself at the time of death. It's like, you've got to know the technicals. You've got to know the technicalities of it internally. Lama Zopa's book is brilliant. You can download Lama Zopa's book. You can get it. Wisdom published it, but this is the better version of it. You can just, if you want to Google, just Google PDF, download PDF, how to help your loved ones enjoy death. If you get that, it's a PDF, it's the entire book, Lama Zopa's teachings, and it goes through all the chapters, what to do when at different stages, and then the death process itself. That's to help you help others, but the indication obviously is to help yourself too. So it's understanding the actual internal process.
Well, I have this guilt thing because I came from a Jewish background, so now I'm kind of like a Jubu. When my parents passed away, when my father was first, then I went down to help her. I lived up here. I went to New York City. And then he went from the hospital to a nursing home. And then she went home with me. For a few days, we would stay with him all day. She went to sleep. The phone rang, and they were looking for her to tell her, but I'm glad I answered it because he had passed away. And then they go, you have to get down here. The body is decomposing, and we can only keep it for 3. I mean, the way they did it was a Catholic.
Why are you saying you feel guilt?
Because we weren't with him when he passed. And then one doctor said he shouldn't have been there. He should have been back in the hospital. He had pneumonia. He was rattling.
So it's okay. You thought it wasn't your mistake. So it's not your mistake, so there's no reason for guilt. It's okay.
Yeah, it's just,
so
it would have been nice to have
prepare for your own.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Really, darling. That's the one. That's the key to success. Go on, people. What else? Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
So you spoke about karma being a natural law, and when I think of other natural laws like gravity, in some ways it's much easier to test, or even botany, I can plant seeds and see what happens, but with karma, I think because a part of it is, at a mental level, I have a hard time proving it at a deeper sense. So I can take the...
Stop, what? Stop.
Yep.
I understand. You're trying to become say you're trying to become an acupuncturist. So where do you start?
Studying.
Studying what?
Acupuncture.
The theories?
Yep.
Right. So would you agree that if acupuncture is a valid system, not as a random moment of putting a needle here and crossing your fingers, but a system, that it first has to be coherent intellectually? Do you accept that?
Yes.
Well, then why do you find a hard time proving karma then, intellectually?
But it's not intellectually, it's that
Excuse me, did you hear me? You start with that first. You said you have a hard time proving karma.
No, but you didn't let me finish.
Well, excuse me, you said the words, I have a hard time proving karma mentally. You said it. So what do you mean?
I said because it's experientially.
Excuse me, did you, I knew you meant that, and so excuse me, I did hear you, and I repeat my answer. You're not listening to me. That's okay, I'm always rude, never mind. You've got to listen to me. You've got to listen to me.
Yeah.
You've got to listen to me. How can you prove acupuncture experientially? What's the first step?
You learn the theory.
And you prove it intellectually.
But the theory makes...
Excuse me, did you hear me? No, did you hear me? Did you prove first acupuncture has to be coherent intellectually? That means you could pass your exam in acupuncture, couldn't you? Intellectual coherence. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? And you can prove it, even teach it to somebody else, couldn't you? Before you stick one needle in one person. When you get this point, you'll understand. Can you hear my point? Can you accept that if acupuncture is a valid system, it has to first be coherent intellectually? Can you hear the words?
But then
can you hear the words?
Yes.
You haven't answered me yet.
Yes.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
And you could even pass an exam saying the liver this and the meridian that, and because you know all the pieces, you know it's intellectually coherent. It's intellectually coherent. It's intellectually coherent. You're not hearing me, I don't think.
Maybe not. Maybe
then
I guess
what do you mean by
what
do you mean by intellectually coherent? What does that mean? What does intellectual coherence mean if you're doing acupuncture? What would it mean?
That I guess you know the theory. You know how you.
You could talk to somebody about it. You could prove it. You could say no, the liver thing is this, and the meridian is that, and something else is this. You could have that coherent conversation, and it would be logically coherent, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's proving acupuncture first intellectually. Then easy peasy to prove it experientially. It's the next step. It comes naturally. You can't hear, can I? I know you have to think about it. You're going to have to think about it.
But I don't have the problem intellectually. So is my
excuse me. You do have a big problem intellectually. You haven't studied enough. You have to prove it intellectually first, as a philosophy, as a theory. Consciousness is not physical, it's beginningless, which means emptiness, which means this, and therefore this brings this, and then brings that. That's how you prove it first intellectually. It's got to be coherent. You first have to have inferential knowledge before you have experiential. It's impossible to do any other way. You start with, this is how you don't understand the process you have to go through. You do it every day when you study anything, but you haven't joined the dots. If you don't have a problem intellectually, then you've proven intellectually that karma is coherent. But you haven't yet, obviously. How else can you get experience of acupuncture if you don't have the theories clear first? And if you're not confident about the theory, you would never dare put a needle in anybody, would you? Would you?
Yes.
Would you?
So my confidence. So I don't have the confidence.
That means you don't have the confidence because you haven't studied it enough. So if you don't have enough confidence in the theories of acupuncture, you better not touch anybody with a needle. How dare you? That's arrogant. So you better get some clear, intellectual, coherent understanding of what acupuncture theories are. Then it's easy to experience. You got to understand musical theory before you play anything. You got to understand the theory of cooking and a recipe before you make a cake. Everything starts with intellectual. Everything starts intellectual. We do it all the time. We learn like this, but we don't join the dots. Karma is exactly the same. What you're saying is you don't have a problem with the idea of karma, but you haven't studied the nuts and bolts of it enough to be coherent and to pass an exam, an intricate exam in the workings of karma. You couldn't do that, could you? That's right. So that's why you're not confident. Can you not hear my point? Thank you. Now you're getting it. Are you hearing it? Well, then study it more. Study it more. Because you'll never come experience until you study it. Not possible. Impossible. Can you hear me? So use your intelligence and study. If you think it's a nice idea, then start studying it so you can present it to others and learn to be articulate yourself. Because it's got to be coherent first intellectually. If you've got to posit the possibility of mind is not physical and this and that, and therefore every thought brings a result, and the motivation this and the something that, and this kind of karma and that kind of one, and this happens, therefore it's quite an intricate process. It's hugely intricate, highly intellectual depth, dealt with incredible depth and breadth in the literature. Do you understand? Good. Yep.
Hello. I'm going to introduce my grandmother again as the basis of the question here.
Good.
So when my grandfather died a number of years ago, I think there was a response from my immediate family to start doting on my grandmother because obviously she was sad.
That's right.
And my concern is that there's not an addressing of the fact that she is also quite likely to die, just given her age.
That's right, exactly.
But I'm hesitant to introduce that conversation because I don't want to cause any suffering.
That's right, exactly. So that's why you have to have the wisdom to know where she's at. So meanwhile, if she's not ready to hear it, you give her lots of love and you praise her and say how life is fantastic. You can even start saying, you know, Grandma, I've been thinking about death lately. I know it sounds silly, but one of my young friends died. And you don't have to be personal with her. Don't give her a lecture. Make it about you so she can't help but hear it. So naturally, because you're giving her space, if she's brave enough, she'll be able to think of it for herself. There's many ways you can help people like that.
And so that was and I'm glad you said that, because that was my follow-up question, though, then, is it a misperception on my part to assume that simply because she is likely closer to death, that she might have some deeper knowledge that I can learn from? I mean,
because she's closer to death doesn't mean she's more intelligent, but some people, if they've been good people, get a bit wiser as they get older, and that's also possible. So, but the key one is to have love for her, have compassion for her, praise her, treat her beautifully, make her feel happy, make her feel confident and comfortable, and then even start this kind of conversation and learn everything you can from her, but treating her like a beautiful human being and treating her with respect. You couldn't wish for better. And what a wonderful life she's had. So to alleviate her own fears. I mean, we all know ourselves when someone praises us in a positive way. It's like heaven on earth, because we all need it badly to reinforce that she has done a good job. She is a good person. And the implication is that she's ready to die, you know. Do you understand? There's so many ways you can help, coming from your wisdom without being blunt and direct with her. Just make it your own story. That's enough. Powerful. Isn't it? Yeah. Yes, Mary.
Just two things, a follow-up to your grandmother. I shared this with you that I was talking to my mother, who was 95, almost 95, and deteriorating quickly. And she's been Catholic her whole life, and I was asking her if she had any questions about, and it was the right time, and she started talking about how she's totally Catholic, never talked about Buddhism with her, and she started talking about how well, I'm curious. I'm not afraid. I'm curious, and I've had a good life, and I had a great life, and I expect I'll have another great life. Going into another great life, and she said that twice with dementia over the last 6 months. So who knows? You know, I was blown away.
It's odd these days, but so many people who are Christian have a feeling about reincarnation. It's not so taboo to say it now. The number of people you meet who talk about, oh yeah, that's natural. Oh, I believe in that. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, and just I'm thinking about karma, and it does make sense intellectually, absolutely. And I think there's a difficulty of of accepting like the brutality of something like the Holocaust in terms of karma. And I think that can be one of the things that can be a stumbling block.
No, I understand. So we've got to get the bigger picture then, don't we?
Yes.
So we've got to get the bigger picture. So often I say, and it's true, that we all ask the same questions, right? But there's one question I've never had, and I say this all the time, and still nobody ever asks me. Why do good things happen? We only ask why do bad things happen. That's always our stumbling block. So I remember one time, so in other words, nobody has ever asked me, you mean, Robina, that little girl has got a beautiful mummy and a beautiful daddy and mummy in the bank and lovely friends and a good education and intelligent and loved by everybody. You mean she deserves it? No one's ever asked me that question. Can you hear my point? Can you hear my point? We only ever ask the bad, which shows our neurotic minds. We think of it as punishment. And we're addicted to misery. Ego is addicted to misery and negativity. And because it seems so shocking, because we hear it as punishment, that an innocent child could be abused, you mean she deserves it. Well, let's think of the good. But we never think that. And when you do, it's quite, you stop in your tracks. Because we take all our good for granted. Every day when we still get, go home and have this and wake up in the morning and have food and people are nice to us and someone in the shop gives us a pint of milk when we buy a pint of milk and doesn't abuse us instead, we just take it for granted. We never ever go, this is incredible. We might think it's good luck or we think the universe has been kind to us, but we don't realize it's the fruit of our past virtue. Every second something goes well, it's the fruit of your past virtue. It's only when bad things happen that we have a panic attack, which indicates we have attachment, which is like this greedy little vampire that only wants the good things and takes them for granted and can't stand the bad things. So you have to look at the assumptions beneath why this is. And because attachment and aversion. We can't stand ugly things, and therefore we assume we don't deserve them. We want good things, and we don't even question whether we deserve them. So our philosophy is really fraught with nonsense. There's a whole series of assumptions there that are completely wrong. Do you see my point? If we had the view, you don't look in your bank account and say, how dare there be no dollars in my bank? I deserve dollars. You'd be laughed at because you know that the dollars that are there are equal to what you deserve, which means your hard work, isn't it? If you don't look in your garden and say, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. You don't say that. You don't say that because we know that the garden is the fruit of your hard work. Your bank account is the fruit of your hard work. But we don't think our life is the fruit of our hard work. We think that somebody else did it to us. It's very schizophrenic, actually. Do you see my point? So it really demands we unpack all these assumptions, Yeah. What else, people? Something else before we have a tea break? Yes. Yeah. Where? Okay. Yes. That's right, exactly. That's the whole point. That's the whole process. We start with, let's say you've never heard of acupuncture. You finished? I'm going to spell it out to her. So you want to finish though? No, that's right. So it's exactly like this. So let's just say you're living in a culture where there's only allopathic. Let's say 1950s Boston. And it's the worldview of Boston. No one ever questions it. No one even knows there's another view. Then suddenly you meet these Chinese people, these weird wacko people who put needles in people. Well, the first thought is, don't be ridiculous, it can't be true, isn't it? That's wrong view. So then you've got an open mind. And you start to look into it. You've got to have an open mind, start to look into it. And you keep hearing about acupuncture. The next step, once you've done some research, is, well, you have wrong view tending toward, doubt, you shake a bit, tending towards the wrong view. You think about, no, can't be true. You keep thinking, you keep checking, and you move a little bit forward, and now you have doubt tending towards the right view, and all of this is predicated upon your research, your openness to it. So suddenly you're hearing more things that keep joining the dots. A bit of puzzle fits this bit, intellectually. You get my point? So you become more confident. Then you do more research, and now you get to correct belief. So confident. But then you get to inferential certainty. That's when you pass your exam and can even teach somebody else the acupuncture theories with confidence because they're coherent intellectually. That's inferential certainty. That's profound. That is like similar to hearing a place called Australia, which you've never believed existed, but you've done all your research so confidently now. You've never been there, but you can tell me exactly how to get there with confidence because inferential certainty is so powerful. Do you hear me? Then finally experience. I might have missed a bit, but it's like that. It's logical. It's how we do everything, but we don't think of it this way. can't test karma. Don't be ridiculous. It's not possible until you're clairvoyant. What are you talking about? But you can't. That means you don't understand karma if you say that. No, but you did say you tried to test an experience, and you can't if you haven't got reincarnation. But you didn't. But I mean, it's obvious. You can't have it. How can you prove experientially that karma's true until you can see it, which is clairvoyance, which is when you get single point of concentration. It's then that you can prove it's true, because you see it directly. And as the Dalai Lama said, when someone said, how do you prove reincarnation? He said, it's enough to have one. This is the other one that's very shocking to us as well. This is very shocking to us. He said, someone said, how do you prove it? He said, it's enough to have one person who has proved it for it to be true. It's the same with maths. But because we don't like the idea of reincarnation, we go, nah, that's not possible. We're just so stupid and ignorant. One person is to have the experiences enough to prove it to be true. And then it's up to each person to follow the steps. But we're so convinced, because we have so many assumptions about the mind being the brain and scientific endeavor and reincarnation is just religion. Mostly it's just a huge aversion and panic and illogic that doesn't want to hear it. We're like babies, you know. Because this is why we're mostly not great scholars. We're very lazy intellectually. We'd rather just believe in it. Most of us just believe in it. We don't have intellectual certainty. That's an astonishing state of mind, to have such clarity, such brilliance that can present the view of karma, reincarnation, as a coherent intellectual view, to be convincing to a person who's got a big mind, you know. So it's massive. It's massive. So just relax and go one step at a time. So when you say there's resistance to it, so you said about resistance to it, you have a hard time, you said. What do you mean by a hard time? Doing what?
Oh, I mean, when things happen to me, you know, I can say, okay, so it's not, I like the idea, right, of it, there being a cause, except I can't trace it back. You know, I don't remember doing that non-virtuous actions, you know, in my past life.
That's leaping ahead, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's leaping ahead of yourself. You've got to first have an understanding, and theoretically it's that, and be content with that.
Well,
what's wrong with that?
I'm not content with that.
Well, that's your problem. That means you're not buying into the hypothesis with enough conviction. You're pushing yourself ahead of before you can go there. This is stupid.
Well, I'm testing the hypothesis.
No, you're not testing it. You're not. You're just resisting it. You're not testing it. You can't test it yet. You're not advanced enough. So you have to have the humility of following what Einstein tells you to do, multiplication and numbers, and go one step at a time. One humble step at a time, and being content with it. You've got to do that, which means you have confidence in it. Of course you can't prove it yet. No one should force you to prove it yet, but all you can do is do that. What else can you do? You're heading towards E equals MC squared. You're only at grade 2. Don't be greedy. You can't do more than you can do. That's why you've got to check that Einstein's a valid teacher. That's where faith comes in. Confidence. What else can you do? We're so greedily trying to prove it. And that's just because you're worried about people thinking you're a stupid person because you believe in karma. Because it's a reputation. Relax. One baby step at a time. Are we communicating here?
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's like you're doing maths and you're in grade 2 and you're agonizing. Oh, I can't prove E equals MC squared. How do I know if it's true? And I'm trying to prove it from my own experience. Einstein says I've got to just relax and go one step at a time. And all you can do is prove 1 + 1 is 2 at that level. And once you've checked that box, whoo, now I've proved that. So far, so good. Einstein hasn't lied to me. Now you go to the next little baby step. Wow, Buddha did, you know. So at least with karma, you can prove that anger causes you harm. Can you prove that much? Not yet.
Well, I can prove that the experience is disturbing and
that's what I just said.
Suffering in
that's what I just said.
Yeah.
Well, that's good enough. You've just proved 1 + 1 is 2. Good enough. Then you go to the next one. You've got to take it as you are, according to each baby step. Stop rushing ahead all the time. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Be humble and patient with it. And Buddha might be wrong. Then relax. I mean, he might be wrong. I'm so far, so good for me. I'm content with the process. I'm enjoying his company. If he's wrong, I'll find out eventually. But so far, he's okay. What more can you do? What more can you do? Are you hearing me? It's just intellectual greed, you know, rushing ahead all the time. Oh, no, conflict, blah, I can't prove it, experience, blah, blah, blah. Relax. Go one step at a time. You pave your way to relativity, equals MC squared, karma, whatever. Relax. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Good. Hope so. What else? Tea time, okay? So have a cup of tea and a cake or... Yeah, tea, coffee, scone, cream, cake time. So any questions based on our last discussion about karma and things? I don't know. Karma's a tough one. And I think it's a tough one because it's completely different from the world's view. Like if you're in a world where everybody thinks about karma, you take it for granted. But it's only because it's completely opposite to the world's view, you know, and then you feel stupid if someone says, "Oh, you believe in karma, don't be ridiculous." So it kind of makes us nervous, you know. So you've got to really think about it and then decide whether you want to buy into it. It's up to you, you know. It's not easy, isn't it? It's a very, very, very different view. Anyway, are there any questions? Yeah, go on.
So I'm fairly confident behind the motivations behind my own actions, whether I'm doing something for a positive reason or a negative reason. I'm not sure I have a full appreciation for why other things are not. Let me change that. A thing happens. I'm in a car accident. It's very easy for me to say that that's a negative thing.
What do you mean negative? Sorry, what do you mean?
That I would call, I think it would be natural to call that a bad karma experience.
Oh, okay, as a result of something negative. Yeah, I understand. There was for fruit of some negative action, you mean?
But if I'm not clairvoyant, I'm not sure that it's appropriate for me to label that thing as a bad karma. Because it could be that accident happened for a positive karmic reason.
I understand. Okay, so it's like this. First of all, the fundamental principle So the fundamental principle is, in general, if something that is hurtful, harmful, an accident, punching in the nose, losing your money, just in the most practical sense, ordinary level, simple, ordinary day-to-day life, I think, in general, we would agree that something like that is called something we don't like. Would you agree, spontaneously?
At this point, I'm not sure.
No, okay. No, you know, you're putting too much into it. I'm talking on the face value. In general, if you had to check some boxes, would you prefer to have no car accident or a car accident? Would you prefer to eat nice cake or disgusting cake? Would you prefer to have someone punch you in the nose or kiss you? I mean, in general, simple, ordinary, day-to-day life, ordinary level of attachment and suffering, then when the unhappy things come, we call them suffering. So that's from the first level of suffering, the suffering of suffering, it means when the bad things happen. So from that perspective, it is the fruit of a negative action that you did. That's a simple fact. That's said to be a fact. Now, then it's a dependent arising. Let's say you're driving along the road, and Mary's driving in one direction, you're driving another. And I'm on a mountain, and I can calculate that in 3.5 minutes, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to kill each other. But all of a sudden, you think of something and you put your foot on the brake and you suddenly go slowly a bit. Then you will just hit a tree. Now, the karma was to go over the cliff and die. But you, by putting your foot on the brake instead of the accelerator, you minimize it and you only hit a tree. So from the perspective of dying, hitting a tree is not so bad. But from the perspective of anything, hitting a tree is a drag. So it is the fruit of negative karma, but it was diminished. It was less than it could have been. So in that sense, you're right. But it's a contextual thing, isn't it? Are you hearing the point? Yeah. So until you're clairvoyant, you can't see all the intricacies of that. That's the point. So that's an example of Lama Yeshe, that monk who died. It looked terrible that he died, but actually it was superior to getting better because next life would have even been worse. So everything in the end is contextual. And that's why the Buddha would say finally to really be able to help people, you've got to have clairvoyance because it's so utterly intricate, the subtleties of these things. But the bare bones function, the bare bones is there's a weed and there's a herb. But then how you interpret it is all based on wisdom. Of course it is. Of course it is. Do you see my point? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Enough thought. Okay. What else, people? Someone else had their hand up, I thought. Yes, sweetheart. Yeah. Huh?
I don't know if I was supposed to wait for my interview if I did that or ask part of
What, darling?
I went to a retreat once, and somebody asked a question, and the person who was teaching said, I'm not supposed to take any questions that I have to interpret with karma. And it was as if it was based on the fact that there are many different forms of karma, like another lineage would teach it one way. And
no, karma is Buddha's teachings.
That's
it's
what
in the text. It's in the text right at the beginning, even before the Buddha. It's just findings of these great Hindus and then the Buddha, and then over the years there are different interpretations. Because it's highly intricate. It's incredibly sophisticatedly intricate, the workings of it, given that it is a natural law. But finally it is all seeable and cognizable when we're merely advanced. So yeah, it's... I mean, that's why you can't make an interpretation unless you're clairvoyant, but you can give the nuts and bolts of it. What is this, what is that, therefore this, because of this and because of that. Do you understand? And that's why at the more advanced level, like we've been talking this weekend, when you understand the law of karma, that things that are miserable like a broken leg is a drag, is a result of a negative action. But at the really brave level, at the bodhisattva level, you welcome the problem because you can work with it. You can learn, and we all call that, learning from our problems. We have that attitude. So you interpret it as a good thing, and that's skillful means. That's very wise. Brilliant. You almost already you can purify it by having a view. Like that woman in prison who couldn't get out, on death row, and decided to see it as a good thing. This is just very skillful. That's intelligence. That's a different discussion again, isn't it? Yeah.
So you use one, sorry.
What, darling? Say.
Excuse me. In the accumulated karma.
I can't hear you, darling.
In the accumulated karma, it is useful by the nature of the teaching. I'm extracting from myself 2 points. The preparation for death. And I had an experience myself when I had in relation to an accident quite a while ago, where I had an experience where the car was completely squished. How I got out, I had no idea. But all I remember, Robina, I usually don't share this, but I saw my father, and he says, "Not your time, go back." Mm-hmm. So I stayed with that energy, and it never felt right or wrong. Okay. It was what it was. So the accumulated karma that intrigues me in the nature of the Buddhist teaching is the suffering. I like the idea that the suffering, you don't have to bear it just to bear it, but you use it wisely.
Well, it's a more advanced level. So the fundamental principles is you've got to first know what is a weed and what is a flower. Then you can learn skillful botany and know how to use the weeds as medicine. That's a more advanced level. The karma is the nuts and bolts of what is an action, what are the causes, and what are the results. It's the nuts and bolts of botany. But then as you get more sophisticated, you can interpret it in more sophisticated ways, but the fundamentals here we're discussing is the nuts and bolts of how it works. Do you understand? So a car accident is the fruit of a negative action. That's it.
And then you let go.
Then it's up to you how you work with it. It's up to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. So here we are, we've all got these different viewpoints in our mind, and it mightn't be apparent to us because we just don't think we have viewpoints. We just think the life is the way it is. We don't realize what's going on in our mind is interpreting life every single second. We don't realize that. So then, within that framework, then, a Buddha would say everything, we experience everything in the universe, everything through the lens of whatever's in our mind. As Zopa puts it, as they say it in Buddhist psychology, the way everything out there appears back to us is in the aspect of whatever is in the mind. So it's kind of obvious. If you have your rose-coloured spectacles on, I say attachment, everything will look divine. If you've got your angry spectacles on, all cracked and ugly, everything looks ugly. It's sort of obvious. We kind of get it, but we don't join the dots. So this is the essence of the Buddha's view, that what goes on in the mind, all the billions of conceptual stories every millisecond, are actually these interpreters of what is happening out there. And then when we finally get to emptiness, as if he's saying there's really nothing that's going on out there that isn't seen and interpreted through the lenses of our various viewpoints. That's his essential thing. So the job is then to radically reconfigure our viewpoints and to bring them into sync with reality. It's a huge point. So, of course, karma is massive for us only because it's not what the world thinks. The materialist view is completely, profoundly, and utterly, and totally, and absolutely different view. The Christian teaching has got many similarities, but fundamentally different because it's God who runs the show. I'm not criticizing. You can have that view, not complaining. But as Lama Zopa says, every millisecond of what we think and do, and every millisecond of what we experience is our own personal karmic appearance. So when we understand the 4 ways that our past actions ripen in the present, like I said, if you take your life, you can divide it into 4 sections. First, the fruit of your own past virtue is why, in this case, we have a human body. Second, within this human body, we have a mind. And within this mind, we have lots of tendencies. This is the second way our past actions ripen, basically as a bunch of habits. We come programmed at the first second of conception with our tendencies to be good at music, to be good at kindness, to be good at killing, to be good at raping, to be good at generosity, you name it, whatever the habit is, whether it's intellectual or artistic or emotional, it's all the same. It's a bunch of tendencies. That's just the third section in our life is all the beings in our world. Think of it from the time we're conceived up to now. Our world is full of sentient beings, is it not? And keep it really simple. You can divide them into 3 categories. Those who are nice to you, we label them friends. Those who are mean to you, we label them enemies. And those who do neither, which is 99.99%. And they're called strangers. So let's forget the strangers. Then we've got our friends and our enemies. We know they all change roles. So basically, this is the third section, the way, the result of our actions is how we're seen and treated by others. This is massive. This is the main part of our life. All the people are mean, the people are kind, then we have the attachment to get the kind ones and the aversion to the mean ones, and all the dramas that pursue. All of this is called experiences similar to the cause. What cause? The cause that I did, something similar to this. What are these ones in the mind? These are the intentions or the actions similar to the cause. What cause? By having done them before. Then the most extensive one, as I said, we all don't all walk around in the sky. We all have a physical environment. So this is even the most surprising one. The very way the 4 elements out there configure for us. So you're born in a country that's stinky, dirty, broken. You're born in a country that's pristine and beautiful. You live in a town where the weather is lovely. You live in the corner block where the house is disgusting but next door's neighbour's lovely house. Everything, the way the physical world impacts upon you, including the people in it. This is called environmental karma. So there's everything in the universe, the way the physical world impacts upon you. Main cause of that, your past actions. The way beings treat you and see you, the main cause of that, your past actions. The way your mind manifests and your tendencies and your good or negative qualities, main cause of those, your past actions. Your own humanity itself, main cause of that, your past actions. So it's a kind of intense concept. It's all consuming, all pervasive, completely total view that's completely and profoundly and utterly different from the Christian teaching, from the materialist view. It's a hugely different materialist philosophical view. So we've got to spell it out. But where we tend to think of karma is, it's like a big stick that's used to beat you up because you're naughty and then bad things happen. It's so cliched, it's like a joke, It's so far from the truth, it's like ridiculous, it's like laughable. But that's because of our own neurotic, deluded minds that walk around feeling like an innocent victim. That's the irony of ego. We all believe we're innocent victims. We believe we didn't ask to get born. We believe everything's not our fault. This is our view now. I just find that view is insanity. It's pathetic. It's self-piteous. It's miserable. It's a victim mind. It blames everybody else. It feels like pathetic. It's like the most dumb philosophical you've ever heard. That's called samsaric philosophical view. So it's up to us what views we choose to take on board. And then apply them every time. Use it to interpret. So if you don't, is this the thing? If you don't know the law of botany, you understand there's a law called botany, and you know that that's what's running in the garden. The law called botany is governing what grows in the garden. But if you don't know how to articulate those laws, you can't grow a garden, can you? You can go, oh yeah, why is there a rose? Oh, that's botany. You can say that. You're not wrong. But it won't help you get a rose. If you don't know how to change it or use it or grow it or develop it, you don't know how to use botany. That's the trouble. So just to say I believe in botany is absurd, is meaningless, is nonsense. You've got to learn botany and know how to use it to interpret what's there. And then when you know the laws, you don't have fear. There's no fear. You know how to interpret it. No matter how bad the garden is, you understand it. If you don't know oncology, and you got a virulent cancer, you'll only have fear and panic because you don't know what's going on. So then you go to the doctor. She doesn't just panic and go, oh, I don't know, it's just cancer, it's cancer, it's cancer. How's it work? Oh, I don't know, just take it away from me. I don't know about cancer. What good is that? She has to be excited to get her microscope onto your cancer and to be able to understand it exactly so she can find the solution. That's how we have to use karma. And at the moment, it's only theory. Of course it's only theory. We'll relax and understand this, be content with the theory. Nothing wrong with it. You can just think what you like. You're the boss. It's up to you. You don't have to tell the world. It's your own private business, you know. You have to announce it to everybody. See you, sweetheart. Bye. So it's up to us, you know. But the level I'd say most Buddhists on the planet don't think about karma. I've got some friends in New York who are like social worker Buddhists. They don't even talk about karma. They're embarrassed by it. Many Zen people never talk about karma, mostly. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying. Many people never think about it. It's just some idea vaguely, you know. So it's the Tibetan Buddhists, they're the ones who really study it in depth in the Tibetan monastic university system. It's up to individuals to take it how you like, you know. But the point, of course, is I'm saying here it's the cause of everything. It's the law that runs everything, not just your suffering. It's the law that runs everything. And the more we understand it, the more we realise it helps us understand emptiness. There's nothing out there that does exist from its own side. There's nothing literally out there that exists from its own side that I'm an innocent victim of. That's meaningless. That's completely ignorance. It's a dependent arising. So even if you walk down the street and you see two people fighting, what's your karmic appearance? To have two people fighting, that's the fruit of your own past arrogance and aggression. That's the fruit of your own past, some kind of aggressive action that you see two people fighting. That you walk, you look in the sky and you see a rainbow. That's the karmic result of something. That's something peaceful. Everything you see is not sort of like superstitious. It's not. People think it's superstition, because why we think it's superstition is because we think everything is just there from its own side, having nothing to do with me. But there's nothing out there that exists from its own side that doesn't have everything to do with you. And every sentient being the same. The way everything manifests out there to you, hot weather, cold weather, beautiful, ugly, peaceful, sweet, good food, bad food. It's the fruit of your past actions. I like to think of like Warren Buffett, for example. I always quote Warren Buffett. He's 87, 88 now, getting on for 90, I think. And I read his biography. His daughter said, I've never seen water pass his lips. His diet says he's a boy. All his life, every day, cheeseburgers, flavoured Coca-Cola, some flavoured Coca-Cola, and vanilla ice cream. That's it. I remember even he went to some fancy Japanese mega rich man on the 57th floor of some fancy building for a 47-course billion-dollar meal, and he ordered his cheeseburgers, you know. So, what I'm saying is, that's shocking. The medical profession should be shocked by that. He should be dead years ago. He's as fit as a fiddle. Well, one, he's 87, 88 and not dead yet. That's called the experience. The third type of karma is the experience similar to the cause of his past non-killing. He's still got petrol in his tank. He's still alive. And even though he eats rubbish, that's the environmental result of his being healthy. That's the environmental result of his past non-killing. So his past non-killing, 1 is why he's a human, 2 is why he is still alive, and 3 is why he's fit, eating rubbish. Equally, we know you can have healthy people who live fanatic, perfect diets who drop dead of a heart attack. We know this is true, but we just kind of shrug our shoulders and go, oh, well, that's just an accident. It doesn't kind of fit, you know. But it's like suddenly discovering that 1 + 1 is 4 on some occasions. It should blow your mind. You can't just say, oh, that's just the way it is sometimes. We do that, you know. Because the way we think of logic in the materialist world is not logical if we compare with karma. But we don't want to think it's not logical. We just think, well, it's just accidental, you know. So it's up to us what we do with it. And the experiential application, the point is, of all of these views, which we decide or not decide to take on board, is the key thing that can give us some courage is the experiential implications of them. So, I just, you know how I like to talk. I've chosen to take on board this view of the Buddhas as my working hypothesis, and I say that always very sincerely. That means I have to learn it as well as I can and apply it by interpreting my life every day and the lives of others every day. That's how I apply it. I can't just say I believe in karma. That's just idiocy. That's just intellectual laziness. It won't help. So, for me, what's empowering about that is if I think it through, for me it's only theory, I'm not clairvoyant, it's only theory, but for me the experiential implications of it are immediately beneficial. So if I have the philosophical view, please hear me, all right? I always speak it out like this. If I have the view, if I buy into the materialist philosophical view, that I didn't ask to get born, that my mother and father decided to replicate a version of themselves, which is exactly how the materialist view says it, that I don't have any say on what genes I get and what DNA I have and what chemicals I have and what tendencies I have because they all come from mummy and daddy. Would you say so far that's an accurate assessment of the materialist philosophical view? Am I correct? Now, I find that the most fascist, appalling view I've ever heard. And don't think I'm being sarcastic. I'm not. Can you not hear my point? Can you hear it or not? I find that shocking. That's fascism. That someone else can decide to make me a maniac and give me anger and psychosis and cancer. I mean, that is to me so shocking, I can't believe it. Don't think I'm being sarcastic, I'm not. But we don't think of it like that, we do. We just take it for granted, don't we? It's kind of good luck and bad luck. It's not fair, you know, it's just the way it is. Well, sorry, I prefer the view of karma any day you damn well like. I'm prepared to keep thinking it. And at least when I apply it, it causes me to take responsibility, to stop blaming other people, to get less angry, less attached, less neurotic, and less jealous. That is my experience, I tell you. Well, excuse me, I prefer that view any day. Thank you very much. And if I turned out the Buddha's wrong, I'm happy. I enjoyed the company. You're kind of hearing my point. So it's not just, you don't just leave the view in your head. You've got to filter it down to your heart, because this is Buddha's point. The extent to which what I think is the extent to which I'm happy or suffering. That's the point. I find that very coherent concept. So if I am the cause of me, then everything I meet is due to my past actions. Then it's like welcoming. Hi there, welcome back. That's my experience. I caused that. Wow, that's a big fat learning for me. I find that very compelling. Whether it's happiness or suffering, I'm absolutely delighted. And it will lessen anger. I mean, my friend Jigdra, I always quote this story. He was in San Francisco years ago, and I first met him in Kopan Monastery in the 80s, I think. I can't remember, somewhere like that. And no, it must have been later, because he was, in 1980, yeah, it was later, because in 1987, there was this first kind of mini uprising, wasn't there, in Tibet. There was all the young monks and nuns who were the radical ones. They all demonstrated, right? So he was part of that. He said his mummy and daddy decided to make many Tibetans. They had 13 babies. It's an uphill battle, though. There's 4 times, 7 times, 10 times more other people in the country now. Whatever. So he was a monk, and all the radical ones are the monks and monks. So they were demonstrating. He got arrested, got tortured, got released, demonstrated again, got arrested again. And then I think this time he decided he'd escape. So he came to Nepal, you know, and I was telling me the story about it, and after he'd left, his father got murdered, brother got murdered, and there were tears in his eyes. And I said to him just casually, Jigdra, do you ever get angry? And he answered equally casually, and he laughed. He said, Robina, angry, what for? It's our own fault. Now that's a heavy statement for us, isn't it? It's our own fault. But he was laughing. But there was a casual way of saying, well, Robina, I made my bed, so I have to sleep on it. It's a casual way of saying, well, this is my garden. The weed, you know, in other words, it's like saying to a person, you've got weeds in your garden. Do you ever get angry? Well, what are you talking about, angry, Robina? It's my weeds. I have to take responsibility. Why get angry? Because now listen to this. This is the point. If every thought that we have, is a viewpoint, then it's a philosophical view, and it's got a series of assumptions. Look at what anger says. Listen to anger. Normal person who's got the philosophical view of the materialist view, who then has bad things happen to them, anger is a natural response, and we're encouraged to have it. It's seen as healthy. So listen to the view of anger. Speak out anger. It is saying, you know, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. Would you agree that's the essence of anger? That's what anger says, isn't it? Would you agree with that? And don't we believe it 100%? Listen to the view, I don't deserve it. So if your mother did make you, and didn't consult you, you didn't ask to get born, and that means I've never met Jonathan, and this guy comes along in the street and punches me in the nose, then that's a valid response. How dare he do that to me? I don't deserve it. And if the materialist philosophical view is accurate, then you are correct. It's a valid response. Can you hear my point? But if you have the view of karma, and in fact everything that happens to you is due to your own past actions, including all the happiness and all the good things and all the beauty and all the wonderful environment, everything, then having anger simply doesn't arise. That's why Jigdal laughed and said, what do you mean angry? So he doesn't. That's what His Holiness said about Tibetans. It's what makes him sad these days, he says, that more and more Tibetans now are becoming angry, which means that they must be changing their views about karma. You feel like ego feels like an innocent victim. Ego, that's how we are. We assume it's the truth. So of course we have anger, and of course we have attachment. This is the response of not having responsibility. Anger and attachment are the response to having a view of no karma, that I'm just this product of someone else's handiwork. I'm the handiwork of somebody else made me, and I'm just good luck and bad luck. So of course you have attachment, greedily wanting all the nice things because you deserve them, and violently pushing away all the ugly things because you don't deserve them. That's called attachment and anger. That's our philosophical view. That's the philosophical view of samsara, based upon the view of no cause and effect. So these intellectual concepts have experiential applications, and that's up to us to get into them and hear them and taste them. So I find that compelling. Are we following here the thinking? It's up to us how far we take it, you know. If you just say you believe in karma, you'll still feel the same way. You'll get angry, upset. Oh, it's all karma. You don't know why. You don't know why. Well, you know, you won't feel any different. It's not going to argue with ego's position. Whereas the view of karma, cause and effect, is the first example of dependent arising, which is the first level of logic to prove emptiness. So by the more you think about karma, it's dependent arising, the more it'll help you loosen the grip of self-pity me. We've got to think it through, got to articulate it, analyze it. Because like I said at the very beginning, Buddha's view is whatever goes on up here, our viewpoints, it is an indicator of whether we're suffering or... No, is the cause of whether we're suffering or happy. That's the connection to see. That takes time to think it through. It's up to us to decide which view we prefer to take. It's up to us. Like I said, my sister Julie doesn't seem to care. I would say from the Buddhist point of view, she's got an incredible amount of virtuous karma. She's generous, she's loving, she's kind, she's forgiving, she thinks things through, she's intelligent, but she just, in this life, doesn't think them through. She just accepts it. That's okay, nothing wrong, I'm not complaining. She's amazing. You don't have to think these things. It's up to us. We're the boss, not Buddha. We're the boss, not Buddha. So as you try and find these views of Buddhas, if you decide to take them on, initially you just try to learn them, and then slowly you start to have them, these views impact, they kind of filter from your head to your heart, and then you learn to see the experiential application of them. That's when it becomes powerful, before you even prove it. Are you hearing my point, Marta? Before I get clairvoyance, already for me it's powerful. But that's up to me. Now you can equally say the same if you believe in God. This Malaysian couple, years ago, when one of those planes went down into the ocean, their daughter was killed. How do you think about, what do you feel about the death of your daughter? We are peaceful. She belongs to God. He has taken her back. So they were happy. They were happy. Because their view of total faith in God, accepted without question, therefore not angry, not resentful, not bitter. That, I think, is a profound way to live your life. I do never complain about that. That's incredible. I think it's superior to the materialist view, actually, because it just brings nightmare and fear and confusion and no reason and no logic and no one knows why, and anger and grief and loss, in my opinion. But I mean, look how most people don't do that. Most Christians don't have that view. They rant and rave and complain about God. It's like most people who might have the view of karma don't think it through and don't apply it, like Jigdal. That's when it makes a difference. If you put your money where your mouth is with the view that you have, then it'll have an effect experientially, you know. That's up to us. So because there's two things about thinking about karma, this very first level, junior school grade 1 or junior school, is one, it brings some kind of, if you follow it through like I'm suggesting, it filters into your own life and it enables you to get less attached, less angry, less fearful, and take more responsibility, be more accountable for all your experiences, because you know they're the fruit of your past actions, so you own them. This brings much peace, much clarity, less neurotic, less resentful, less angry, less fearful. So one, it helps you become more, accepting of your own reality and more, therefore, more grown up and more content. But also, it helps you then, it's the basis of compassion for others. Because you realize, my God, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's experiencing the fruits of their own actions, but blaming everybody else. That's the nightmare. And not to be criticizing, that should be breaking our hearts and give us compassion for everybody else. But you won't have that until you know it for yourself. So this view of karma is like having compassion for yourself. Yeah. Of course. Happens all the time. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I understand. No, I understand. Absolutely. So this is, we have to know where we're at with this, don't we? We have to know where we're at. So junior school level, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth and don't harm. And if you have to, remove yourself from the object. That's it. That really is the answer. That's the first level of practice, because you can't handle the pain. It is a person harming you. You know it's the fruit of karma, but you're so overwhelmed because you're not really that together in yourself, you can't cope. It's like if you can't resist the chocolate cake, you've got to remove yourself from the chocolate cake. If you can't resist the alcohol, you've got to remove yourself from the alcohol. That's junior school level of practice. Control your body, control your speech, control your behavior, protect yourself from danger. That already implies some real self-respect. That I joke and say if that happened, the 40% of all women on this planet who get murdered by the partner in the same bed wouldn't get murdered. Because there's some awareness that this is overwhelming and I can't handle it. But we don't even have that amount of awareness. We just go like moths to a flame, and then we get abused and insulted and then get angry and resentful and all the other dramas. So the very first level of practice, which is already profound, is understanding it's the fruit of karma, but recognizing you're not capable of coping with it, so back off. Or at least control your body and speech. This is already really stupendous practice. It seems so cute and simple, but this is already huge, right? So the next level of practice is the compassion wing, where you're so advanced now, you understand so totally it's karma, that you're able to completely forgive the person, and you're so together in your body, speech, and mind that it's just like water off a duck's back. So you've got to know where you're at. We've got to know what our capability is. So the first one is play safe, control your body, control your speech, at least don't create more harm. And be brave enough, if you're not going to leave altogether, but be brave enough to at least do that much. And this is massive practice already. It implies so much self-respect. You're using your mind, but to control your body and speech. And then you can go to high school and start to look into the delusions and karma and know them intimately and well, which are the causes of why this is happening and the causes of your own misery, and really work on your mind now, So everything's incremental. Are you with me? But it's already that's so hard, because we end up just being overwhelmed by it, and then we get into the fights, and we feel victims, and we can blame them, and we complain about them, we get depressed, and then it keeps on going like a night. We get all entangled with each other's junk. We can't separate our own stuff from their stuff. So really, even just saying this simple level is already a profound level of practice. You've got to have confidence in the process. You've got to have confidence in yourself. You understand? Does it make sense? Yeah, but even that demands, you see, but that's advanced, though. See, that's advanced. This is the first level. if you're a victim, meaning you don't have a view of karma and you're completely pathetic and all these people are abusing you and harming you at work and you don't know how to respond to it and you get angry and you cry and you go home and you're full of fear and you talk about them behind their back, that's ordinary samsara. So to get to the point where you've got so much courage that you can now start fighting back, that implies already a huge amount of wisdom. It's not just, fighting back isn't just shouting and yelling and punching, that's delusion. But to be able to have enough clarity and enough wisdom to know it's karma and it's your own delusions, to have such clarity and control, such courage to realize, not just for their sake, your sake, but other people's sake, you're going to be prepared to fight back. That's profound. That's high-level compassion practice. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. We think of protest as just ranting and raving, coming from anger and attachment. That's no benefit to anybody. It's just sending yourself that's just digging your grave deeper. So to be able to protest with courage and wisdom implies an incredible level of clarity internally. And it implies you're so courageous, you're prepared to be up there and stand up there and get bashed to pieces out of compassion because it's the right thing to do. That's not out of just anger and attachment. Those Tibetans, I'm not trying to say they're all saints, they had the view of karma. Jigdral knew why it's happening. He's not freaking out being like a victim. But he could see that it was not valid because China does not own Tibet. So they know the reason why it's happening. So they had enough courage to go out there and demonstrate and risk their lives. But he wasn't angry. That's pretty advanced, wouldn't you say? You get my point? That's based on understanding karma and delusions. No, that's the victim mind. That's exactly how we think of it now. That's completely nonsense. He laughed and said, it's our own fault. He didn't mean like the way we think. I deserve it, I'm guilty, I'm bad, I deserve to go to hell. That's just garbage ego grasping, garbage delusions. There's not even any virtue in that. It's like absurd and gross. He understood why it was happening. It's called the law of karma. But he even said he wasn't angry. That's really what's powerful. That's advanced, isn't it? That means at least you've done a huge amount of work. Junior school, which is karma, and high school, which is your mind. And then out of kindness and compassion for everybody, they decided to demonstrate at the risk of getting killed, which most did, That's advanced. So in other words, you're really not qualified to go out to demonstrate until you're quite advanced, almost. You could say it like that. Otherwise, it's just coming from anger and attachment, which is just more samsara. Do you understand? So that's why the very first level of practice, if things are going bad at work and you just can't handle it and you're freaking out, please leave. Excuse me, protect yourself and leave. If you're brave enough and you see that other people are suffering and you really understand why it's happening and you even have compassion for the bosses, and you've got to have compassion for the bosses, you've got to have compassion for the bosses who are cheating you. If it's just anger, it's just more samsara. You've got to know that they're harming themselves. So out of compassion for everybody, you then demonstrate, well done, girl. But don't hold your breath and think the result will come. The same with the Tibetans. So it's progressive, it's incremental levels of practice. All of it demands you've got to know your own mind where you're at. First level, move away. Second level, be so together with your mind and your karma that you're prepared to actually, be clear and stand up for yourself. But still, the compassion component has to come, which is what makes it a valid action to go out and demonstrate. Do you understand? And compassion for everybody. Do you see? So it's really kind of, you've got to know yourself. And that all these levels of practice are like this. They're experiential. They're psychological. Initially we don't hear it this way. We just hear it as medieval lam rim. Precisely. That's the point, dear. That's the whole point. And right now, when we're victims, which is samsaric, we don't know, we haven't got a clue, as Lama Zopa says, that what goes on in our mind plays any role at all. We believe we're a complete victim. We believe everything we see is the way it is, and we're like lemmings, We just walk into disasters. We're like an utter mess. So the beginning process, which is thinking about karma, is such a massive wake-up call. And then your mind, the delusions in there. This is huge. Now, this level of practice is really all for your sake. And as soon as you do it for other people's sake, that's compassion wing. So really to demonstrate demands compassion. Otherwise it's just out of anger and attachment. What's the point? Do you understand? What else, people? Yes, sweetheart. Pardon? Sweetheart? That's right. Okay, so then, go on. I understand. So what happened? Okay. So is there a question in here, or is it what's the question? What was this group, though? What is this scenario that you're talking about? But what is this scenario you're discussing? No. What is this scenario in which all these conversations happened? Is it a party? Is it a therapy session? Is it at the swimming pool? What is it? So what was the point of it? Give me the context. No, give me the context of what the point of this meeting was. I've got to understand the context. Okay, so how come that she was talking blah blah about her experiences? Okay, she just blurted out her feelings. So then you decided to help her. And what did you say? Huh? Earlier? What do you mean earlier? Okay, so you decided to give her advice. Well, that's advice. Imagine 1,000 arms, something that's called advice. No, I understand it. So you gave her advice. So what's the question? Uh-huh. What's the question, darling? I'm dying to get the question. No, that's a statement. I want a question. I don't think you have a question. You just want to tell me something. What's the question? I understand. Why not? But why? What's it got to do with the price of fish? What's he telling me this for? No. That's not the way to. No. The question is, what's going on in my mind? Well, if you're upset and distressed, if you're upset and distressed, that's called because of your attachment and your aversion. If you didn't have attachment and aversion, you'd just be blissful and relaxed, and you would have changed the subject and forgotten all about it. So every time we respond to something, if it's distressing and strange, we have to realize it's due to our delusions. That's the approach. So you have to look into your attachment and your anger or your aversion or your whatever is there. Maybe you took a risk in saying this and you risked something, you know. Oh no, well then that's your mind. You've got to sort that out yourself. That's kind of private. Well, that's naturally, darling. That goes without saying. That's a default view. But you've got to look into your mind and see what all that's about, that's all. And I can't tell you that. Yeah, you've got to look into that. No, whatever. Whatever the names of the states of mind you're experiencing, you've got to label them. That's it. Thank you, darling. Who else? Something? People? Time for dinner soon. Time for lunch. Yes, we can go.
If a monk at a demonstration, whether it's in the West or in Tibet, does self-immolation,
yes.
Is that anger?
I have to know the person's mind. We were discussing this yesterday, and my sense is if you see somebody and they're racing down the street, crying, screaming in agony when they're burning to keep the mic, when they're burning to death, I would suggest their mind's quite distressed, wouldn't you?
Oh.
Wouldn't you suggest if you're running down the road screaming in agony as you're burning to death that your mind is distressed? Would you accept that?
I didn't know how they react.
No, I'm asking you, wouldn't you accept that if you saw a person screaming in agony, their mind is distressed?
You're right. But
okay, well, that's
but
the
I
answer.
thought
their
that
mind's
they were
distressed.
calm, they took it, and they're just demonstrating to everybody in the world
no, if they were calm,
that there is no death.
If they were
not
calm,
afraid of it.
there is death.
Okay.
If they were calm, then they were calm. That's a marvelous action.
Okay,
but if they're not calm, then it's not so cool.
Have they all been distressed and maniacal? Have they all been distressed and...
I can't speak for any of them. I'm only saying...
If you see the movies or the shots... Or
if there is one person who burns himself to death and is calm, I would suggest he's a very advanced person. Right. If there's another person who burns himself to death and is screaming in agony, that they went above their pay grade.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see my point?
Yeah.
That's the only way to say it.
Yeah.
Definitely expected too much of themselves. I think it's time for dinner, even though it's not time for dinner. I think it's time for dinner. Okay, you people. So then, just please enjoy your delicious lunch. Think of it as the handiwork of many people. So we see lunch through the lens of kindness, not attachment. Whatever's out there, we think of it as the handiwork of many beings. All the creatures who died, all the beings who made it and served it and fed it and drove it and grew it. We think we're going to eat to be fat and healthy, so we can carry on practicing, so we can develop our qualities, so we can help others. Just think like that. And then let's have lunch. Are we finishing the same time today or earlier? Let's see how we go. Maybe we have less lunch break. What did we have yesterday? 90 minutes. Did it work, or was it too long? Okay, let's have an hour then. Let's have an hour's lunch, and we see it. Maybe we'll leave early. Don't need to, but we could. Okay. So enjoy and discuss over your lunch. Please, 1 or 2 or 3 people, if you go together. You don't have to do it, but I really recommend you talk through these things. This is very powerful, you know. Discuss it all, but keep focused. Keep focused. Keep focused on the topics. And if you don't want it, then be silent. That's okay. That's your call. Thank you.